recorded for you teachers out there. If you want to show this to multiple sections of your classroom, of your class, in the coming days, you will have this available to you, and I'll email you after about how you do that and how you watch the recording. So that'll come after the webinar, and for those of you that are stuck snowed in, you're in luck with that too. So I'm going to transition into a different room now. You're going to see the room just change a little bit, and I'm going to tell you what we're going to do today. All right, so come on. There we go. So you don't see me yet. I'll put that up in a second. But what we're going to spend time on just for the first 5 minutes is we are going to actually do just a quick overview of the Holocaust. Now, this program is not that. It's not an overview. We're going to spend as much time as possible talking with Luna today and asking her questions. But just so everybody kind of gets on the same page, we're going to spend 5 minutes on that. And then we're going to turn it over to Luna, and I'm going to be asking her, some of your awesome questions. Some that were already sent in, and some that you guys can type in live. So what you see kind of on the left-hand side of this webinar area, this webinar room, is what we call a Q&A pod. You can see you can type in that Q&A pod, and I will be looking at it throughout the program. And if you want to ask Luna a question, we'll be taking some questions from that pod today. Now, we have a lot of people watching with us, so we won't be able to even scratch the surface of the amount that you're going to be asking, I'm sure. But we will try our best to answer, your questions today. So, as I said, we're going to start off with a quick overview of the Holocaust, and so I need to ask you guys a couple questions to see if you're up to snuff on your history. So I've got a poll question I'm bringing in here first, and if you guys haven't done this before, you're going to see it come up on screen, and I'm opening up a poll. My question for you guys, just to see that we're all on the same page, is how long ago did the Holocaust take place? So A, 20 years ago in the 1990s, B, 40 years ago, 1970s, C, 70 years ago, which is 1940s or so, or D, 100 years ago, 1910s, 19-teens. All right, I'm going to wait for you guys to respond, and it looks like you all know what time in history we're talking about. Very good. All right, so we're going to publish the results so you guys can see almost 60% of you guys know that this was now 70 years ago. Very, very good. All right, so in addition to that, as I said, we're just going to do the quickest of overviews and talk about what the Holocaust is in less than 5 minutes. And of course, you're going to be spending lots and lots of time on this in your classroom if you haven't already. But this is just so that we are all on the same page together today. So, okay, what is the Holocaust? Now, a definition you might find in your textbooks is something kind of like this. The Holocaust was the systematic, bureaucratic, state-sponsored persecution and murder of approximately 6 million Jewish people by the Nazi regime before and during World War II. Also, you guys might talk about in your class as well that there were close to up to 5 million non-Jewish people who were also killed by the Nazis during the Holocaust. And you can see that coming up on screen right now. And another thing, of course, you might talk about with World War II in general is Nazi Germany. And with the rise of the Nazi Party, with the rise of Hitler, anti-Semitism, discrimination, and violence became a government policy. And as I said, I know I'm just briefly touching on these things, but you guys will talk about this plenty in class. And soon, certain policies and certain restrictions against Jewish people, appeared in Nazi Germany and eventually Nazi-occupied countries. You all will talk about the Nuremberg laws, restrictions against Jewish people in many aspects of life. You'll also talk about Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass. Violent riots against Jewish businesses and synagogues. Those are some things that you'll touch on. You'll also eventually touch on escalating into ghettos and completely isolating Jewish people in cities and towns across Nazi-occupied Europe. So this complete separation, control, and confinement. And that eventually, though, these ghettos were liquidated. People were moved out of these ghettos to eventually many went to what we call either a concentration camp or an extermination camp. You've maybe heard death camp or killing center. Luna is going to tell you about the concentration camps today that she went to. But, we kind of define these in a different way from each other. Concentration camps are usually camps where victims were imprisoned without a trial. And as the war went on, these camps, of course, incorporated forced labor. And then a death camp is specifically camps where victims were killed on this large scale. But eventually, and kind of actually related to why we're talking today, these camps, as the Allies, the United States, the British, the Russians, as they came into Nazi-occupied territory, they came across many of these concentration camps and death camps and were shocked by what they found, and also finding many, many dead, but also living survivors. And actually today, everyone, the reason we're talking, today is the 70th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. And today is also, because of that anniversary, International Holocaust Remembrance Day. Now, I'm going to bring up a quote on screen, and this is how we're going to close out the webinar today. But throughout this program, I want you to be thinking about this quote from Martin Niemöller. He was a religious person, as you can tell, but he was part of this confessional church that protested against what the Nazis were doing. But as you can see here, he never really spoke out, he said, for the victims, especially Jewish people. And later, after the war, he said this on screen. In Germany, they came first for the communists, and I didn't speak up because I was not a communist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak up because I was not a Jew. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a trade unionist. Then they came for the Catholics, and I didn't speak up because I was a Protestant. Then they came for me, and by that time, there was no one left to speak up. Now, this is a really powerful quote that I'm going to ask you about a little bit later in the program, so just keep thinking about that. But I think it's an important message for today. Also, of course, in history, but an important message today that I think Luna is going to be touching on a lot during this program. So what I'm going to do now, though, is hide this. I know wasn't that the quickest overview probably ever, but you guys want to talk to Luna. I know that's what we want to do here. So I'm going to start my webcam. And all right, Luna, let's see if we're both on the screen here. All right, there we go. All right, so you all see us now. So everyone in the digital world, this is Luna Kaufman. She is our wonderful guest star today, and we're so glad that she's here today with us and talking with us here at the museum. Actually, not just once, but twice today, which is pretty crazy. So, and I'll give you details if you want to watch her again later this evening. But right now, Luna will be talking to us today. We're so glad you're with us. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
And, we have a lot of questions for you today. As you know, I sent Luna over 100 student questions before this program even started, so thank you, everyone. And so we're going to be starting with some of those questions today, but I hope you put some more in that Q&A pod there. But Luna, can you first tell us where you're from? Tell us a little bit about your family, about your childhood, that sort of thing.
I was born in Krakow, Poland, of a family that traces its roots back to 1700, and I don't know beyond that because our family history only goes to 1700s. I was born in a house as a fourth generation in the same house, the same place, and that's where I lived till the Nazis chased us out. We had a middle-class family. We were quite comfortable, and we were one of the assimilated families, which means that we lived a life together with our Polish neighbors and participated in any of the Polish endeavors. As a matter of fact, my 94-year-old grandfather, who was killed at that time by the Germans because he refused to kneel in front of them, was a messenger in an uprising, Polish uprising in the 1800s. And the family goes back as big activists in Poland. And we had a lot of Polish friends and Jewish friends. I attended school where I was one of 3 Jewish children. Otherwise, the school was a Catholic school because all the state schools were run as Catholic schools with the church supervising it. And I personally did not suffer any discrimination in school. As a matter of fact, for the most part, I was the president of the class, and and nobody made an issue. When I was a little girl, I think 8 years old, 7 years old, one of my Christian friends, another girl, called me a dirty Jew, and I knocked out her 2 front teeth for that. And the principal of the school punished her rather than me. So this whole image that there was a tremendous difference between the Poles and the Jews, it's true, while there was still a lot of anti-Semitism and a lot of problems, there were some people who were much more progressive and much more integrated than the others, because the very religious obviously stayed within their own circles. But we were not that religious, we were also much more integrated with the rest of the society. I was 12 when the war broke out, so as you can figure out very fast, I'm now 88, and I really feel that we do need to work together, and we do need to talk to each other and learn about each other. I think that a lot of the problems are stemming from the ignorance. The Jews don't know about the Christians don't know about the Muslims, and nobody knows and nobody wants to hear about anybody else. So I think it's very important that we open our eyes and ears and we reach out to others in order to create a better world than existed, because it was just horrible what was in existence.
And that's why, a lot of times students ask me personally, why are we talking about this? Why are we studying this? We talk about it a lot in school. How does this matter to me? And I think that sums it up right there. And I think that's, what we're going to kind of hit home, hopefully, with everybody, throughout the program. Now, so a lot of students were wondering, how your life changed when the Nazis invaded and how quickly, things started to happen, in Poland after 1939.
That's very interesting, because really, when the war broke out, we were on the state of mind that Germany was the most liberal country, most accepting country. As a matter of fact, when the anti-Semitism was raging in all the other countries, the Jews were getting the best education in Germany, and somehow nobody believed that a country which was considered a cultural summit of Europe will behave in this manner. Nobody believed that they are, too encompassing and too reaching out, and then they will turn, and nobody wanted to believe it. So while in the 30s, early 30s, when the Nazism started in Germany, we were still attuned to the fact that this is something temporary and this is something that isn't going to develop into anything. Even so, the shipments of Jews escaping from Germany were coming to Poland, and my mother was serving on a committee in housing and feeding the people. Still did not think that this is a possibility. And everybody says, oh, why didn't you run away?
That's another question I got too.
When you think about it, run away where? Anti-Semitism was raging all over Europe, everywhere, and also people did not travel and they did not resettle as easily. Don't forget, when we were a family going back to 1700, our whole family, a very large one, lived in Poland. So how do you separate yourself and leave everybody behind and just take off? You still want to hold on to the rest of the family, to the rest of the roots, and everything else was completely foreign to us. But while it was foreign, my father was always aware of the fact that you have to have some kind of a profession that is in your hands, that you don't need the language in case you will need to be moved, because he was a war prisoner. He was an Austrian officer and was a war prisoner in First War in Russia. And because he was very handy, and he did speak Russian also, but still, because he was handy, he was able to start it by repairing umbrellas and then switch to embroidering the vestments for church and making a nice money and being able to live, because the prisoners didn't live in prison camps the way they did in the Second War.
Mm-hmm.
I don't exactly know how they were living, how they were accommodated, but they really needed to make their own money in order to be able to survive. So as a result, he enrolled us in a high school, which we called gymnasium, where we were getting all preparatory courses for university, but also we were learning style. And he was planning that when we finished high school, we will go to Paris to study couturier and styling.
Ooh.
In order
Wow.
to have something in our hands. And that 1 year of working in that school and learning something about sewing came extremely handy in the camps, because while we were incarcerated, we all had only one set of clothing, and the clothing would tear, and if somebody had an extra blouse or what, and I was able, obviously by hand sewing, because we didn't have any sewing machine, to do the work and earn like another slice of bread for doing a repair, which meant a lot when you're getting one slice of bread a day. To be able to get another slice of bread was quite an achievement.
Yeah. Now, actually, we have a question on our computer here from North Platte High School. I think this kind of relates to, when we're talking. They're asking, was your hometown, was Krakow broken up? Was there a ghetto? And did you, were you taken away there to the ghetto at some point in Krakow?
Now, the Nazis were very, very clever. They never did anything drastically, instantly. They would do things in a very progressive way, in a very fast speed. But still, it was very gradual. They would take us, first of all, they closed all the banks and all the schools. So we had no access to our money, because before the war, nobody kept money at home. Also, people kept gold and kept diamonds and valuable things, and they did keep it home with the thought that if it need be, we will sell it, and we have something. As a matter of fact, my mother sewed in the border of our coats. She sewed in some jewelry. In case we are separated, we should be able to pull it out and sell it. And the gold was at such a tremendous price that later on during the war, she would have her gold crowns removed and sold it for gold, because that would provide us with quite a few days of food. It was amazing, the value of things.
Yeah.
So then Krakow as such was never ever attacked and never suffered any damage. Not a stone was turned for centuries. And everybody believed, because it was kind of a nest of the most religious Christian people, Catholics, and they always felt that it was protected by God. When you go through Krakow, on one street you can have 5-6 churches from every century, since first century on, of every architecture that you can dream of during the centuries. And they always believed that this is what was protecting Krakow.
And then what happened after?
And then what happened was that at first they started by saying that our apartments were too big and they were taking away our belongings. And one day they came to our house, and by then we were living 2 families in our apartment, because my aunt with her 2 sons and her husband came over from the Western Poland. And they were coming to take our belongings, our furniture, because they were furnishing apartments for the SS people, for the Nazis. And we had a very big grand piano. So the man, the German, the Nazi, turned around and says, "Who plays the piano?" And we pointed to my cousin, we all played the piano, but he was the best pianist among us. He was the oldest, and he played and sang for them. At that point, they turned around, they said, "No, he plays too well, we're not going to take it away."
Wow.
But that was a very, very rare occurrence. Yeah. But that was right. But it was not long after the war started, not even a year, where they said that all the Jews have to leave the city and we have to live and go to the suburbs. When you think about suburbs here, it's a very desirable place. But when you talk about suburbs in Poland, they were just villages, because as far as the streetcar went, there was still a city. Where the streetcar ended, there were very few cars. People didn't have cars like they do today. So the suburbs, so-called, were just villages, were outhouses and outside water wells, completely primitive life. And we had to move out there, which made it very, very difficult for us, because the houses over there, or the apartments, were very tiny, and the people were assigned, a Jewish family, into one room, a whole family, and the other people only had 2 rooms to their names, so one of their rooms was taken, so we were not really received very well. And also the family was spread all around the city into different places, and the transportation was forbidden. We could not take a streetcar. Obviously, there were no cars, so we kind of lost track of each other, and it was very difficult to live like that, because we were completely, unable to make a living. What I did, because I was always very handy, I learned how to do beadwork, and I would make necklaces and pins and decoration for dresses, and that's how was helping the family. I also did knitting, where people would have 2 old sweaters that were falling apart, and I would combine it into a design of 2 different colors.
Wow.
And so you resorted to everything possible, and that kept me busy, which was very good too.
I want to give the school a shout out, but I'm trying to find it in all the questions. But I think someone was asking, and you've touched on it a little bit. I think this was from the Sierra Vista, Arizona school, Mrs. Reddix's class. But I think they were wondering what life was like kind of in the ghetto. I mean, was there employment? Was there enough food, enough water? They when they learn, especially about ghettos in Poland, and the conditions. Was it difficult?
It was very, very difficult. However, when the ghetto was created, we almost looked forward to go there, because what happened was we will be together and we'll know what's going on in the world, because the radios were completely forbidden. There were no newspapers. Television didn't exist yet. Television was developed many, many years later in the States, but we didn't even know that something like that was coming.
Yeah.
So we were living in complete isolation, because we had no phones, no newspapers, no radio, and no personal communication, because we were so separated. So we looked forward to going to ghetto. However, when we got into ghetto, we were assigned in a 2-room apartment. There was one family that was already living over there, of 4 people. Then we were another 4 people assigned to this 2-room apartment. And then there was another woman with 2 daughters that was also assigned, and we all had to live in those quarters. But you adjusted to it. But at first we didn't have any employment. We kind of lived with whatever we could scrounge, and we had a Christian neighbor where we left our belongings, because we couldn't take anything with us, as you can imagine. and she would go on a streetcar, because the streetcar went through the ghetto streets.
Mm-hmm.
She would sell some of our possessions and throw to us the money, and passing through the ghetto, so we would have money to buy a piece of bread or
Mm-hmm.
something. But she was several times caught and beaten, and it didn't stop her from coming.
Wow.
And this was a
That's
tremendous help to us.
Yeah, yeah.
And the conditions were very difficult.
Oh yeah, my computer went to sleep, but
Yeah.
but it's still live. There we go.
Yeah,
Thank you.
So we kind of welcomed the idea of going to ghetto, and everybody had to be assigned to work. I personally liked going to be assigned in the winter to shoveling snow off the street, because there were no snow plows, no cars,
Right.
nothing. It was all done by hand. And I thought, that was my good opportunity to spend a day outdoors.
Yeah.
People consider this to be a very big humiliation. I consider this a privilege, to be able to be in the fresh air, and sometimes the sunshine, and you frost to death, but that's all right.
Yeah.
When you're young, it doesn't matter. But then
much,
later on, we had to start getting jobs, because what the gossip came through the ghetto, that if you will not have a job, they will take you for the extermination camps. And I got an assignment for a job in a brush factory, and I always felt somehow I had a drive to do everything perfect, because it gave me the satisfaction and gave me the self-image that I'm still worth something.
Mm-hmm.
It was not, a collaboration with the Germans or anything, but making brushes anyhow wouldn't be collaboration. And one day I decided that I'm going to get an assignment for my mother for work. I cannot quite figure out why I went. That we had it's called the Arbeitsamt, the employment office. I went to apply for her job. I have no clue why she didn't go by herself. I don't know how.
Yeah.
So I come in, and the woman who was receiving me said, yes, she was a German woman. She said, I'll assign you a job if you knit a bag to a sweater I'm making for my fiancé. It's his birthday, and I need it in 24 hours. So I said, all right, sure. You never said no.
Yeah.
And I knitted the sweater, I knitted it much smaller, put it into water, stretched it twice the size, and brought it the next morning, and she gave me an assignment for my mother to the brush factory. And that's what saved her life.
Wow.
Because then later on, not a long time after that, they were liquidating the ghetto and taking the people to the first camp, which was Płaszów concentration camp. That's the camp that was portrayed in Schindler's List. And she was able to enter the camp. It sounds ridiculous when you think that this was an award to be able to enter the camp, but if you didn't enter the camp, you were put on a shooting range, so there was no choice.
Yeah.
And that's what saved her life at that time.
We had, this kind of relates to what you were saying, but we had a question. This is from Brookwood School in Thomasville, Georgia. I don't know if you guys are with us right now. But kind of like you said, you had an awareness that these concentration camps and death camps existed. They said, in numerous accounts we have read, survivors have stated they had no knowledge of concentration camps. So did you, when you were in the ghetto, did you know?
We pretty much knew that they existed, but we were not aware exactly what was happening in them. And by the time we were in the ghetto, we were quite aware that there were concentration camps, and we were aware that the ghetto is not going to last forever. But, don't forget, I was quite a little girl. When you think about 13, 14 years old, a lot of the things that the adults knew, I didn't know about, because they were trying to protect me. So. Yeah.
And speaking about actually being a teenager, God, I don't know, this question made me smile. This is from, I think, Miss Mader's class. They wanted to know, did you have like a boyfriend or a significant other, or friends that you grew up with that you
look, I was I was 12 when the war ended, and I went to an all-girls school.
Yeah.
But in the ghetto, I had a lot of friends, and I usually had always male friends. But the strange thing happened, talking about friends, that I had befriended one boy who was working with me in the brush factory, and he was supplying with the parts that I needed to work with. And he was always very good to me and making sure that I got my supply, because by then we paid like penny a piece. After a day's work, if I had enough money to buy a loaf of bread, was a lot. But the alternative wasn't so good, so even that meant something. And then after the war, we lost track of each other. He always considered himself to be my boyfriend. And for 40 years, we were looking for each other, not knowing what happened. And then somebody from my temple was in Philippines and sat with a man from Australia, and he was telling them his life story, and said, you know, I had this girl and I'm looking for her.
Oh, no way.
That's 40 years after the war. Looking for her all over, and the woman said, "Oh, we have a woman from Krakow in our temple." And you know, he looked at her as, you know, this one woman. How could it be? So he started asking, did she have blue eyes? Did she have mother? And she said yes. So he wrote a letter to me for her to deliver to see whether it's me. And then we found out each other. So he decided to send his son from Australia through New York to make sure that I turned out to be decent, that he was not going to be disappointed.
No.
And we maintained the complete communication with him. I still am in touch with his wife. He passed away already. But we found each other 40 years later, and we decided that every other year we'll meet either in Europe, or if they will come to America, to Australia. So there was always something going on.
That's a great story, because I know a few students asked, like, did you keep in touch with anyone? And that's an amazing story.
Oh yeah, I keep in touch with everybody. I have friends that were born across the street from me.
Yeah, that's wild. So after living in the ghetto for I'm not sure how long. When did you said your mom went to the concentration camp? Did you go with her, or did your family split up?
Together.
How did that
Yes,
happen?
what happened was that they took my father and my sister, and they were sent to a concentration they were building some barracks. I don't exactly know. It was called Barackenbau, building of barracks, but I don't know exactly. Because I never saw them again once they took them out of the ghetto. And I stayed with my mother in the ghetto, and then they liquidated the ghetto. And when they were liquidated the ghetto, they took us, we were supposed to put each one valise and throw it out of the window into the courtyard, mark our name, and then we were marching from the ghetto to the Płaszów camp.
How far was it from?
Probably about 2-3 miles.
Oh, okay.
I'm very bad at estimating things like that. But what happened was that you had to have your papers, and in the papers there has to be a statement which said that you have a job. Without the job, you could not get into the camp. And we were walking, and we were halfway down the road, and all of a sudden my mother looks into her pocketbook, and her passport, her working papers are gone.
Oh my gosh.
And we didn't know, we knew this was certain death, and we didn't know what to do about it. So we started kind of staying back in order for the people to go through, hoping for a miracle. And all of a sudden, we hear somebody yelling, Mrs. Foos, Mrs. Foos, that was my maiden name. It was a friend of mine who found her pocketbook on the ground, and being very nosy, looked in and saw her papers and decided that she would try to find her, because she knew that this was a death sentence.
Yeah.
And this girl lives now 2 blocks away from me in New York.
What?
And the funniest thing is she didn't remember she did it.
Oh my gosh! And like, yeah, the smallest act, what she maybe thought was insignificant, somebody saved your mom,
Yeah.
So
she knew it was significant.
Yeah.
Because she knew without this piece of paper, she couldn't get into the camp.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So.
Well, so going into the camp, I think. Let's see here. I'm sorry, I'm getting a lot of questions now. Looks like Schultz homeschool. They were asking. So you were saying you had to have a job. You had to have a specific paper. So what kind of jobs did you do? In these camps generally.
At first, I was in Płaszów. I was working in the brush factory. As a matter of fact, I became so good that when the commandant of the camp needed brushes for his horses, they asked me to do it. And when I did it, they asked me to go to his house to deliver it. Mm-hmm. And I went to deliver it, and the cook, knowing that we are starving, gave me a package of raw meat. And I thought that was a great price. So I stuck it, into my dress. Mm-hmm. I had a dress with fitting waist, so I stuck it on my stomach, and I was going home, and all of a sudden, he has the dogs, the Great Danes, and the Great Dane walked into the kitchen. I thought I would die because I feel with the raw meat on me here. But somehow he must have had better tidbits because he let me go, and I went to the barracks with that piece of raw meat.
Oh my gosh.
But I almost died knowing what was happening.
Wow, that's crazy.
And then from there they transported us to Skarżysko, which was an ammunition factory. As a matter of fact, there is a book written about it called Death Comes in Yellow. It was about ammunition factory where it's documented that the owners of the factory paid for each one of us certain amount of money in order to have the workers to work for them for nothing, obviously. Mm-hmm. And the conditions were atrocious. There was no food, and the quota that we had to produce was unbelievable. And also one part of the factory produced underwater mine that were made from picric acid. That's the best translation that I know of. It was something very poisonous that turned your skin orange and your hair very orange, and you worked there only for a very short time. 2 months was the maximum, and your lungs would be attacked, and you developed bleeding of the lungs, and so at first I was working in a much safer place, and then they assigned me over there, and I did get sick, and after 2 months, obviously, they took me into the infirmary, which normally would have meant the end of it, but it was toward the end, as the Russian forces were entering eastern Poland, and somebody who was the biggest henchman in the camp saved my life. For some reason, they always called me the Kleine, the little one, because at that time I was about 14 years old, and I was always quite short, so I looked even much younger than my age. And as they were coming to take everybody, because they would not take anybody sick to Germany, because they were preparing to transport us to Germany, he took me in my nightgown, threw me through the back door and said, "Run away." And I did run away, and they did ship us from that factory then to Leipzig, to the same Hassack factory. The same people owned it, and we were the best working force because, first of all, our quota of production was something 5 times what the people who were working there before had, and they would work in 2-hour slips and would get milk in order to protect their lungs. We got 10 hours straight and no food. So that was, they didn't have to house us, they didn't have to dress us, they didn't have to feed us. So that was a great workforce. And once we got to Germany, we were sent to work with metal works. So that was already no contamination. And we were very lucky because when we arrived there, they took all our clothes away. Not all our clothes. We only had one change of clothing, but the private clothes. And I was issued
let's show this, because I know there were some students that asked if you kept anything. Bring it over that way. There you go.
This prison dress. And you see there is a number here.
Let's see, on this side. Yeah, there we go.
There is a number here that I embroidered because I wanted to make sure, because we were called by numbers, and when we came across the assessment, they didn't ask our name. We had to tell them our number, and I wanted to make sure that this was neat. I always felt if I kept neat, if I kept my hair combed, it kind of would keep me alive, because otherwise, what would you, once you let yourself go, it was all over.
Yeah.
So I wanted, I got a piece of strap for the machines and made a belt of it, and I embroidered the number, and I felt that I'm looking decent, because that gave us some kind of a human dimension. We weren't treated like humans, so we were fighting to feel like humans.
Now, I think in every student question, every class that emailed us with questions, and actually I know we got a few from Haynes Academy. Shout out to you guys in New Orleans. You were talking about, dressing nice was like kind of, as nice as you possibly could, and keeping appearances is one way that you survived. Can you tell them, how, a lot of students wonder, like, how did you make it through? How did you survive? Were you telling yourself something? Were you doing something to get through it every single day?
It's very interesting. I cannot imagine my mother going through it. Having children now myself, whatever you suffer yourself is nothing. But when you look at your children suffering, and this was also another thing that I wanted my mother to feel a little better. If she saw that my spirit was up, we were never separated. We were always together the entire war, which was very, very fortunate and very rare. And I felt that if I appeared to look decent and I kept my spirit, it would give her some relief. And it did, but as a young girl, you feel indestructible. I never believed that I will perish. I felt I'm going to live. To the degree where at one time there was, during the high holidays, we were forbidden to pray, to have anything religious. And there was a group of Orthodox people who decided that they're going to pray no matter what. And the Germans spotted it, and they came in, and they selected number of people, and they were shooting them and beating them. And I was sitting at my bench working, and as they were working out, the men who did the most shootings stood behind me, and you were not allowed to even turn your head. You had to work like nothing ever was happening the entire time. And then I heard a click, and I thought he pulled out a cigarette to light and was shutting the case, because they all had silver cigarette cases. This doesn't exist here, I think, now.
But yeah.
But they always carried the cigarettes in the cases. What showed up, he didn't have a cigarette case. He had a gun to my head. And he pulled the trigger, and there was no bullet. So he looked around, and I admired my mother in all that. She was sitting on the other end of the room looking at it. She was as white as a ghost. She never said one word, because she was looking around if my life mattered anything to anybody. Since nobody responded, nobody cared, he didn't feel like reloading the gun and walked out.
Oh my gosh.
You never knew you can't say that you did anything to save your life or what, because it was so unpredictable you wouldn't know.
Yeah, yeah. That's gosh, that's just a crazy story.
Yeah.
Let's see here. We've got a question. So from St. George's 7th grade class, they were wondering, and they've probably learned about this in their class. So you had the number on your uniform. Were you ever tattooed with that number?
Because only Auschwitz and some of the bigger the extermination camps did the tattooing. I can't quite figure out why were they tattooing people when they were sending them to the oven to be shot. But that was their logic. But since I went through the labor camp route, we were not tattooed.
Early on, I got a question about how you were liberated and how old were you? Let's see here. Trying to find their question, but it's up here somewhere. I'm sorry I can't give you a shout out there, but yeah.
Yes, that was a very good one, because when the war was ending, we were in Leipzig, and the overseers didn't want to go to the front. So they all gathered out into what they called the Death March. We were marching 24 hours a day. Every now and then they would let us stop for a little while. We were outdoors the whole time. There were thousands of people. You probably saw some films of people marching, and they gave us no food. We were marching for 3 weeks, and then it showed up when I looked at the map after the war that we were just going in circles. And then one day they divided us into groups of 300 women, and they put us into a barn for the night. That was the first night that we could just rest the whole night. And in the morning we opened the barn door, and there were a pile of German uniforms were lying. They evidently escaped and left us there. And the foreman of the estate came in and said, "Look, I'm only a foreman. We have no food for 300 people, but if you give us few people, we have mounds of potatoes that were stored for the winter." That was May by then. It was near Leipzig. Then you can cook a soup. I'll have a little milk to put to the water with the potatoes, and then you have. And that was our saving, because after starving so long, people who were in camps where the armies walked in, and the soldiers meant well and gave people food. A lot of people died because they couldn't tolerate the food. But we were safe but then we found out that we were in no man's land, which means when two countries come together, there is a strip in between that doesn't belong to anybody. And we were between the British and Russian fronts. So we stayed in that barn for a few days, and all of a sudden 2 Russian soldiers came on a motorcycle, and one of them got to the mayor of town, put a gun to him and said, "I want those women in private homes. Everybody in town has to take few people in order for them not to live like that, to be." So they took us in, and as a matter of fact, somebody found some German Nazi insignia on that farm. But we were very comfortably over there. Obviously, no newspaper, no radio, no news from anything, but we couldn't care less, because for the first time we slept on the bed. As a matter of fact, the first night we slept on the floor because the beds were too soft for us. And every few days somebody would go to an adjoining town where there was a bakery and bring bread. And one day I went with my friend, with whom I was the entire war, to pick up the bread from the other town. And a Russian soldier on the way met us and said, "How come you're wearing your prison dresses?" So he said, "What do you mean? We don't have anything else. All we have is this one dress." He said, "Didn't you hear the war is over for 5 days already?" We had no idea.
Wow.
And then we dropped everything. We ran back to town to tell everybody the war was over. But we still had nowhere to go. But the Russians would come, and the commandant of the Russian army, of the area came in, and he wanted to have a good time. He saw a young girl, so I decided I have to be very, very careful, because they were always, there was a lot of rape going on at that time. And I said, I'll play along because he has the arms.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
So I got him very drunk. And he finally, there was some woman who to me looked like an old woman. She was probably 25,
yeah.
because he brought a big diamond to give whoever will sleep with him. And he slept with her. And that was over that evening. But the next morning, a Jewish doctor from the army, from the Russian army, came and brought 2 valises, one for my mother, one for me, and said, you better run away right away, because he realized what you have done, and he's coming tonight to play with vengeance. So we left right away, and we immediately headed for Krakow, because being that the family was all from them, that's where we will find everybody. So then we landed on platforms to go back home. There were military transports that were carrying people back to Poland, to Russia for another, and every few stations we had to change because they needed this train, that train. So it took us a week.
Wow.
For a trip that probably takes about 7-8 hours. And we finally wound up in Krakow and came to the building, to our house. And we decided to wait there to see if anybody survived from the family.
Was someone else living there? You know, sometimes that happens.
It was very interesting, because when we had to leave Krakow, we gave our apartment to our tenant's niece, because she had nowhere. She came from Western Poland and had nowhere to live. And when we came, she said she won't live with strangers, wouldn't let us in. We still could see our furniture inside, but she wouldn't let us in. But then another neighbor, whom we didn't give anything, took us in. And then we got an assignment, and I immediately enrolled at a university, because my mother felt that education is worth everything.
So you were 18 at that time?
I was 18 at the time, yes. And what they did, which was very nice, they gave us a year at the university to make high school equivalency. So as a result, I wound up getting my high school equivalency and finishing my college at the time that I normally would have graduated from college.
Wow.
And I think I might be the only one who has a doctorate without ever going to high school, because I got a honorary doctorate from Seton Hall University for my work with the Christian world.
Well, let's actually talk about that. I mean, man, we could probably talk for another hour. And look, it's already 12:55 our time. So what I would love for you to do now, if you wouldn't mind talking about, when you came over to the States, your work with Sister Rose, your work to get this monument behind us, erected, and what you've been doing, and spreading the message and spreading your message, to school kids and everybody alike,
I decided when I came to the States and my life became much more normal that I'm going to have a revenge on the Germans. And actually the Nazis, I shouldn't say Germans, because it's not right to make them all equal. And I think my revenge was that I was going to have a positive life and do something with the society that will make it a difference. And I work very closely with the Christian world, because I feel that we need to work together to improve our relations and to prevent this kind of animosity building up. Actually, it's not an animosity, a prejudice against one group. And we have done tremendous strides. I met Sister Rose, who was a very renowned nun who actually contributed toward the Nostra Aetate edict, which was in '64 was established in Vatican, saying, first of all, absolving Jews from the sin of killing Christ, and also saying that we have to embrace each other and all the other nations. And it has been very rewarding. The response of the world is wonderful. And this is what my work is. And I think that for the young people, they have to open up their eyes and arms to other races, to other religions, to other cultures, to see that we are all equal, that we all need to work with each other, because that's the only way that this world will survive.
Well, Luna, thank you for that wonderful message. And I'm looking here. We've got a lot of questions and a lot of participants. Look at all that. Can you see all that right there on the side? Look at all those questions. Unfortunately, we can't answer all of them today, and I know we have to be kind of aware of their
question. Well, a very short one that I forgive. Forgive.
Oh yeah, let's talk about that. Have you been able to? Forgive?
Everybody asked me, "Do you hate the Germans?" And I said, hate doesn't take any space in my being, because it would only spoil my life, and the people I would hate wouldn't even know about it. And it would also hamper my doing the right things. So this is something I eliminated. I read in a cleaning store once a little proverb. Hate is like an acid. It spoils the container and everything in it. And I refuse to be
a container like for
that.
It. Yeah.
Well, so that's my closing.
I like that. I like that a lot. Well, as I said, we could probably talk for at least another hour. So I'm sorry we don't have that. I want to thank everybody for watching with us today. And I'm going to switch over. You're going to see the room switch one more time. And if you want more of Luna, which I know you do. So when you're home tonight, hopefully this will load up in 1 second. You're going to see, yes, here tonight Luna will be talking to a live audience at the museum with another Holocaust survivor. The cool thing is, with the powers of technology, is that you can actually watch this live as well from your computer, just like how you're doing now. It's a event on live stream, so you guys can see the link right there. If you click on that at 6 o'clock Central Time, you'll see Luna, and she'll be talking to a live audience here. So that's going to be another really neat thing. And actually, I said we were going to close with this Martin Niemöller quote. I'm going to bring it up again, and I'm going to bring up a poll question related to it. Let's see here. Now, my poll question for you all, and this is one actually, instead of you answering a question, I'm going to have you type in your answer. So, what is this quote, do you think? What is the lesson? What is the meaning? Based on what, you've heard Luna say today, and based on what you've talked about in your class with the Holocaust, what do you think the meaning is? And you're going to see right there, you can type in your answer. I'm going to leave that quote up there for a second, but teachers, let me give you some final reminders before we really officially close out today. There's some resources there. You see that in that little box that says web links. Those there, you can find some museum resources about the Holocaust. I sent along a lesson plan and a teacher guide. If you didn't get that, it's right there. Bibliographies for further reading. Local teachers, so I know we have a lot of Louisiana teachers tuning in. We're going to have an Echoes and Reflections workshop here. It's on, I think, February 26th. And let me double check that. Yes, so on February 26th, run by our local Anti-Defamation League chapter. So that's a really good workshop if you've never been to it. Also, Luna has a book, and I also included the Amazon link to that book, and that's the kind of bottom link that you see on there. And so if you want to know more about her and about her life, her amazing story, you can read her book. And we're actually going to look at I'm going to bring up your student responses here. Let's see if we can see them. Let me broadcast the results here. All right, what did you guys say? That you have to speak up when you have the chance, and you have to do it with boldness and courage. Man, I love that. Always speak up against injustice. Stand up for other people, even though they're not like you. Oh man, well I think you guys, really understood, what this webinar today was about, and why we spend time studying this in school. teachers, I'm gonna leave this up for you to keep responding, but I'm gonna give you one final reminder, and sorry, it's a plug for the museum. We have another